meeting of the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners is called to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Fretham.
Here.
Mattis Castillo.
Here.
McDonough.
Here.
McGuire.
Here.
Ortega.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Here.
Carter.
Here. Thank you very much. Commissioner Reinhardt, would you lead us please in the Pledge of Allegiance while we all go on mute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much for that pledge. Board members, the agenda of June 23rd, 2020 is presented. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Moved by Commissioner McGuire, seconded by Commissioner McDonough. Is there any discussion? The board chair will request an amendment to the agenda to allow for a board chair statement and a discussion on the alleged incidents in the adult detention center. Is there a motion to amend?
I move to
So
amend.
move.
Thank you. Motion from Commissioner Fretham, second from Commissioner Ortega. Is there any discussion? Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll on the amendment to our agenda?
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Fretham.
Aye.
Mattis Castillo.
You're on mute.
Aye.
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Carter.
Aye. Thank you. That amendment to our agenda has passed, and now we're back to the main motion on the amended agenda. Are there any further items of discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll on the amended agenda?
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Fretham.
Aye.
Mattis Castillo.
Aye.
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Carter.
Aye. Thank you very much. That item, the item that we added, the statement and discussion regarding the alleged incidents in the adult detention center, will come after our COVID-19 update on the agenda. The minutes from June 16th are before you and presented for approval. Is there a motion?
Move approval. Victoria.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Fretham.
Aye.
Mattis Castillo.
Aye.
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Carter.
Aye. Thank you very much. The minutes have passed. I'm delighted to ask Commissioner Mattis Castillo to share with us a proclamation in honor of Pride Month. Commissioner Mattis Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's my honor to present the proclamation for Pride Month in recognition. And so I'll read that first. Whereas the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer communities of Ramsey County are an important and vital part of our cities and neighborhoods. And whereas Ramsey County is a welcoming community that recognizes the importance of inclusion, equality, and freedom. Whereas the nation was founded upon and is guided by a set of principles, which includes that every person has been created equal, that each has rights to their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that each shall be accorded the full recognition and protection of the law. And whereas Ramsey County's LGBTQ community are a vital part of and contribute to a stronger community. Whereas Ramsey County is dedicated to fostering acceptance of all its residents and preventing discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Whereas Ramsey County is strengthened by and thrives upon the rich diversity of our ethnic, cultural, racial, gender, and sexual identities of its residents, all of which contribute to the vibrant character of our community. Whereas the month of June was designated as Pride Month to commemorate the Stonewall riots of June 1969, which are recognized as the start of the LGBTQ rights movement, and numerous events have been organized around the country to commemorate this event. Whereas the celebration of Pride Month in Ramsey County is a reminder of what makes the community an inclusive, equitable, and just county, and of the dedication to advance together across all differences. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed, the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners declares June 2020 as Pride Month in Ramsey County, and be it further proclaimed that Ramsey County Board of Commissioners renews its commitment to protecting and strengthening the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people in our community. It feels good to proclaim this, so thank you very much for the honor to do this. We have staff. I see Ryan is presenting very carefully to their staff. I also want to recognize that especially, we have a commitment to serve our community in this way, and with all the other stuff going on, we want you to know that you have not been forgotten, that we are paying attention, and we want to congratulate especially our foster providers. They received an award this month, again this year, because of their work in inclusion and serving our LGBTQ youth. So thank you very much, and we celebrate you very much.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, on behalf of the board, I'm here to present the proclamation to some of our staff. Kim, Brian, Tony, Alejandro, thank you for being here today. And I'm going to turn the mic over to them to share any words, and I will present directly to Tony today. Congratulations.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. My name is Tony Porter. First, let me thank the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners as well as the County Manager's Office for this proclamation. As a resident of Ramsey County and as a member of the LGBTQ community, this means a lot to me. Additionally, because my husband and I have adopted 2 children from foster care, our first son 7 years ago in Ramsey County. So it's been a long time I've been involved with the county with this work. In 2018, when Ramsey County Social Services first contacted me to help with the work they're doing with the Human Rights Campaign and through their All Children, All Families program, I got a call as I was out of town and asked if I would participate, and it was a no-brainer. Absolutely, I would do that. This is very near and dear to me, and I really appreciate it. And just as a member of the Ramsey County community, as a member of the LGBT community, it means a lot to me that my home county has put the dedication they have behind this work. I think it was mentioned already that for the past 2 years, again, just now, last month we were awarded, Ramsey County Social Services was awarded for their adoption and foster care units, HRC's highest recognition in the All Children, All Families program as the innovator status. So we've worked really hard over the past 3 years to really push the envelope and do everything we can to really truly support our LGBTQ youth in care as well as LGBTQ foster and adopted families. So thank you once again for this honor. We appreciate it, and we really value the dedication the county's put behind this. Thank you.
Does anyone else want to say anything?
Good morning. My name is Kim Closey. Thank you, commissioners, and the screen, and county manager. My name is Kim Closey, and I work in public health, and it's an honor to be here today along with my colleagues to accept this proclamation. We all know that the GLBTQ community has fought long and hard for equal protection under the law and equal access to the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and quite simply, dignity and respect. That fight is far from over. I stand here today to remind everyone that Pride is not just a history lesson. It's not just a week in June when we get to have a parade when there's not COVID. It's personal. As part of the GLBT community, I have not always felt that I was a valued and important member of this community. And I, like so many others, have had many experiences of discrimination and unequal treatment. In the early 2000s, I gave birth to my son, and then I had to hire a lawyer so my partner could adopt him. My partner then traveled to Asia to adopt our second son, full of lots of adoption agency fees and international paperwork. And when she came home as his recognized parent, we had to go back to court and pay more lawyer fees so I could adopt him and be his second parent. In 2005, I had to leave the state and the country in order to get married. And when I came home, that marriage was not recognized. When I started working here in 2008 in Ramsey County, I went through all the regular new employee onboarding. I tried to sign up for health insurance, and I couldn't. I was not allowed to cover my wife and my children because in the eyes of the Ramsey County policy, they did not exist. My family did not exist. And that didn't change until 2013 when the Minnesota governor signed marriage equality into law. And then suddenly the state recognized my marriage, the insurance company suddenly recognized my family, and I finally had the same access to medical coverage that most of my other colleagues had the day they started their work. My personal experiences are just a snapshot. Anyone here could provide more experiences of their own discrimination. A lot has changed in the dozen years that I've been an employee here. I have generally found Ramsey County to be a safe and respectful place to work, but it's often challenging and frustrating to be part of a bureaucracy that moves so slowly. Statements like the words that are in this proclamation today really do help. In a time when our community faces ongoing attacks from the federal government, such as attempts to bar same-sex family adoption, attempts to ignore violence in the trans community, and many attempts to roll back the hard-won anti-discrimination policies, and there's so many more examples, it's more important than ever that local government send a different message. I look for signals every day that validate my family's safety. I notice when they are absent. I notice which communities don't show up for queer people by failing to include us in the language of their policies, their celebrations, and other community events. And I notice when agencies and organizations do make a public effort to be inclusive. I have a physical reaction to seeing the rainbow flags on the Wabasha Bridge. I welcome the proclamation from this board as a declaration that Ramsey County staff are seen and valued and equal members of this community. Thank you for honoring and recognizing the innumerable contributions from the queer community in Ramsey County. Thank you for continuing to move us all forward toward a vision of inclusive and equitable and just community. It matters. Thank you.
Well, we're all going to applaud. Yes, we see the applause. And I will just say in closing, Madam Chair, I know that Alejandro and Brian, Kim, and Tony represent a large swath of employees who are not all with us today because it's challenging to all gather in the same spot. And to that we say we see you and we stand with you as well. And we thank all of you for both your individual and collective leadership in ensuring that Ramsey County can live up to the vision and ideals and that it's more than words on a page. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much to all of you. We are there with you. We do see you, and we thank you for sharing with us today in this opportunity to recognize the human rights, the respect, the dignity due to all in the LGBTQ community and to all in our communities. We are so thankful for this opportunity to recognize the many challenges that we have in Ramsey County, throughout the nation, throughout the world, in lifting up a community where all are valued and thrive. And we want you to know that in this proclamation and in our actions, we intend to fulfill that expectation, working along with you and all in our community. So we celebrate you, We appreciate and recognize this month, but more so that every day of every year, we need to continue to work to be certain that all are respected and valued and can thrive. Thank you so much. It is typical now for us during COVID-19 to have a COVID-19 update at every board meeting, and we will do so now at this board meeting. I will call on the county manager to begin that COVID-19 update. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as we've done every week, I'm going to turn it directly over to the Director of Public Health, Kathy Hadeen.
Thank you, County Manager O'Connor, and thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Here is the COVID-19 situation update as of today. And we'll go to the dashboard to show the current data. There have been in Minnesota 33,227 people who have tested positive for COVID-19. Last week at this time, we're at 30,693. Total cases requiring hospitalization to date across the state is 3,830. Hospitalized as of yesterday is 332, which again is down from last week and the lowest that we've seen in a while, as well as hospitalized in the ICU as of yesterday was 156, down from 186 from last week. Unfortunately, though, we continue to lose people to COVID. 1,416 people have died. Last week, that number was 1,335. We'll move over to the Ramsey County data. As of today, we've had 4,389 people who have tested positive for COVID. Last week at this time, we were at 4,014, an increase of 375 positive tests. Total cumulative cases requiring hospitalization in Ramsey County is 650, with 205 people who have been in the ICU. And unfortunately, we have lost 213 people in Ramsey County to coronavirus. Of the 4,389 cases, we'll go down to the racial demographics of people tested positive in Ramsey County. 29% are white, 26% are Asian, 17% unknown, 16% are black, 10% have chosen other, 2% multiracial, and we have seen an increase in American Indian cases. We are now up to 21 cases. We continue to work within communities to ensure that people are getting testing, and we'll talk about that in a second. Ethnicity is 18%, which continues to go up along with our Asian demographic and American Indian. Again, the majority of cases within our county system are in St. Paul, with every city showing at least 10 cases of coronavirus. Total approximate number of completed tests across the state is 513,137. That is an increase of 90,215 tests over the last week. It's a good number. That means that we are doing our best as a state to continue to test as many people as possible, as that is the best way to slow the spread right now. Remember, you can get this information from our data dashboard by going to www.ramseycounty.us/coronavirus. And just a reminder that testing continues to be offered today, Tuesday, June 23rd, and tomorrow, Wednesday, June 24th, at the Jimmy Lee Rec Center, also known as Oxford Community Center. Testing is open to everyone, whether you have symptoms or not. Testing is free and no insurance will be needed. It's open for walk-ins beginning both today at 11 a.m. and ends at 6 p.m. both days. Oxford Community Center is located at 270 Lexington Parkway North in St. Paul. You can call 1-800-657-3903 if you don't have access to internet or need assistance with making an appointment. We continue to provide information about testing on our website, as well as there will be more smaller pop-ups that pop up and are in community and available for all people to get tested at. I will leave it at this for today, and happy to take questions after County Manager O'Connor's updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'll start where Director Hadeen ended. She's been working hard with public health to think about other ways to continue to provide pop-up testing across our community to ensure that we are robustly testing, and particularly in areas where we're concerned about disproportionate rates of spread and impact from the coronavirus. I want to continue to underscore that point that we see an overrepresentation among people of color, particularly Black and Brown and Native communities, the Asian community, in our COVID testing. This is a problem that has gotten worse over time, not better. And it's important that we continue to say that every week, because at different moments we get questions of why are we trying to focus how we spend CARES money? Why are we trying to focus our programmatic responses in particular communities? And the answer is because the data tells us that if we don't, the results of this virus will be far more significant in those communities than across the general population. A couple other brief updates for you. I had the opportunity to meet with the Equity Action Council, which was something put together by the Racial Equity and Community Engagement Response Team. We met for 90 minutes last Wednesday evening, and I want to thank everybody that was a part of that conversation. We're getting better and better at having Zoom conversations with like 45 people on the line at once, which is a challenge, but it's an opportunity at the same time, and I want to thank the facilitators for making that work. We talked a lot about CARES Act money and how it's being spent, along with the framework that this board has approved through previous actions. I want to acknowledge on behalf of the community, it's confusing. It's a lot of money. It's coming fast. Trying to understand how we are spending it is a big question that continues to come my way in the way of staff. Our department heads were a part of that conversation. I want to thank them for continuing to engage directly with research and with the community to try and break down those barriers. There is also a level of confusion about the interplay between CARES Act money and the timelines and the emergency declaration related to coronavirus that the county board took, which is not tied to the CARES Act funding timeline. Coronavirus could be with us well beyond, unfortunately, the end of the year, whereas the CARES money right now does not go beyond the end of the year. And I can understand very clearly why this is a confusion for many, because there's so many timelines and complexities coming our way. I just wanted to highlight that for all of you today here to let you know that's an ongoing piece to the conversation around our own communication, is trying to talk about the emergency period and how CARES Act is but one of many aspects of that broader emergency period as we go forward. Finally, on the conversation with them, the same concern over the rates of infection disproportionately impacting particular communities, as I already discussed, and the discussion of the navigator role, which we'll do during the workshop today. Some of the same questions being asked of them, we're going to talk about here later during our conversation today. They are an important stop along the way in the development of this navigator role. These are community leaders, they are community elders, they are community younger people who have been through, understand, and have experienced our systems and have ideas about what that navigator role looks like. Many of them are in alignment with what you were saying in our workshop 2 weeks ago, but it's important to get that feedback from multiple angles. Just know that we're doing that. In a few other spaces, you may have seen a lot of news reports this week about both the increasing rates of cases across the country and also concern as we move toward the fall. I just want to overlay that with the direction that we provided earlier this summer to staff, saying until Labor Day, we would not be reevaluating the current status of our operations, in which if you can work from home, you should. You know, we have remained open for service, but under these new models and the way we do it. And I just want to acknowledge early on and continue the conversation that September 1st still looks like it's going to come at a very confusing time for this virus and where it's going. And so we just need to be aware of that. And we'll continue that conversation as we near Labor Day. But the idea that on Labor Day we're going to flip a switch and all go back to the way the world operated in November of 2019 feels pretty far-fetched at this moment in time. And I just want to continue to talk about that because it's good to have the repetition and to be upfront as we can be. We are trying to bring a sense of normalcy back in places where we can, or at least return to business as we can. Service team workshops, which were originally slated to begin much earlier this year, will start in July. There are 2 scheduled, both the Economic Growth and Community Investment team, followed 2 weeks later by the Health and Wellness Service team, and then 2 more are scheduled for August across 2 of our other service teams. So just know that we're bringing that work back in here beginning 2 weeks from now. And budget conversations with the county manager, which would have normally happened in May, are happening starting tomorrow and carrying through this week. So we have reformatted those. Our process remains on track. We've been working through the budget chair and vice chair as a part of that process, as we normally would as well. And because we start our process early, we have been able to adjust our timelines without impacting the back end time. And so from the board's perspective, there are no changes at this point. Just wanted to let you know how work is continuing forward, even with all the uncertainty around us. Finally, I'll end on there's just a lot happening, and coronavirus is but one aspect of that many things happening at the same time. Through it all, though, the commitment that I want to continue to make here is that as we see the public health conversation at times being backburnered or cast aside because it can be uncomfortable, inconvenient, it leads to the idea that we just simply can't return to the way the world was operating beforehand. Our commitment is to continue to bring it up here as a part of this update and as a part of our daily work in the county. It is important to address coronavirus head on if we want to try and do everything we can to slow its spread and its disproportionate impact across our community. And so we will continue to do that. I want to thank our public health director for continuing to do that. It's a challenging time for public health officials across this country as the advice that says we cannot go back to the way things were in 2019 gets challenged or scrutinized. I just want to appreciate our public health director for continuing to stand strong with all of her staff in spite of that and continue to give us unbiased, scientifically driven information that aligns with the state of Minnesota and our regional peers wherever possible. And with that, Madam Chair, we will stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the update that has come from public health and from the county manager. And we do have a question that has come patiently from Commissioner Mattis Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Chair Carter. Thank you, Director Hadeen and County Manager O'Connor, too, for a great update. You know, as we've been hearing these updates week after week, the common thread remains that, you know, COVID is disproportionately impacting our communities of color. And as we have, you know, set racial and health equity as a priority in Ramsey County, I just wondered, and as a conversation of the board, if maybe it's time that we consider declaring racism as a public health crisis. This has been demonstrated over and over. It really is a place that we know that it's because the longstanding systems and denial of services and access for millennia in this country is really leading to the health inequalities. And I don't want to say that just as a statement, but as something that we really mean and value and put forward. And as we hear this, COVID is revealing just how severe racism impacts people right to their very lives, and that we can't deny it anymore. And so just wanted, as we hear all of this, to just bring that up in acknowledgement in this conversation.
And I would want to thank you, Commissioner Mattis Castillo, for bringing that up, and in everything that we have been doing and focus on racial and health equity. We've certainly acknowledged in our work and will continue to do so the crisis that racism is for all of us. Making that statement in a declaration through a board resolution is also very important, and we have been working to ensure that will be done. That proclamation or request, I should say, for a resolution has come forward to us. We've been working together and with Commissioner Fredham on preparing that. Of course, it will come from our public health department, and we consider all of those issues and put that resolution together and before us. I will turn to the county manager for a question on timing. I know that it will not be long. Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I can tell from the facial expressions of others as well as in the chamber, your mic was cutting in and out. Just know, I don't know if it was the internet or whatever. I think I heard you say you are hoping we do bring something forward at some point. That's kind of a key thing to make sure I got right. So if I got that wrong, please tell me. But to answer the question and the process and asking for public health to be involved, I'll turn it over to Director Hadeen. I think the most important thing from the Ramsey County staff and leadership side is to ensure that we don't just say it's a crisis, that we actually take actions that continue to demonstrate in the way that we operate the crisis around us. And I would hope that our actions ring true on that, whether or not any declaration has been or is ultimately made. And I'm not saying in any way that's inconsistent with Commissioner Matas Castillo's earlier statement. It's about continuing to elevate an issue and bring additional awareness to an important topic. That will remain an important piece for us to ensure that action-driven aspect remains a part of it. I would ask Kathy to weigh in on specifically the technical part of a public health emergency and how those are declared from a public health perspective, and then just to make sure that as we bring something forward, that's in the back of our minds so that we don't get into a technical conversation when this is really a transformative conversation on a deeper level.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner Matas Castillo for bringing this up, and County Manager O'Connor. There are actually a few cities within our state that actually have the authority to declare anything as a public health emergency. This is a little different because you're saying a public health crisis. So we'll have to definitely dig into what that means. But I absolutely echo that what needs to come with this is it needs to be backed up with action. There's funding. There's so many pieces about what it means to declare racism as a public health crisis. Black and brown bodies are constantly being weathered due to the stress of racism that causes diseases. It causes early death. It doesn't matter the education that I have. The likelihood of me dying from a stroke earlier than a white counterpart with the same education level and the same income is higher because of what I look like. That is a crisis. So I appreciate that you brought this up and that this is something that we will work on together as a county system, with you as a board, with our racial and health equity administrators, and as a public health department. And I'm looking forward to how we ensure that this is not simply a declaration, but it is actions that we take to improve our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to Commissioner Matas Castillo for the question today as well. I do have a number of hands raised. Commissioner McGuire.
Mary Jo, you're on mute.
I can hear you. I can hear you, Commissioner McGuire. Yeah.
Do you want to say them? We can't hear them. We can't hear.
We'll work on it on our end. We also cannot hear it in the chambers, Madam Chair, just to acknowledge.
Oh, I can hear you fine, Mary Jo.
This is strange. Would the county manager please update us on whether or not we should continue at this point?
Madam Chair, could we take a
members who cannot hear Commissioner McGuire.
Madam Chair, can we take a 3-minute recess here and work with the audio team and see if we can figure out whatever that issue might be?
We will take that 3-minute recess, and thank you.
Thank you.
It's really weird. I can hear you, Mary Jo.
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
I still can't hear Mary Jo though.
I can.
And I can.
Yes,
Am I the
Mary
only-
Jo, I could hear you.
I'm the only
Yes.
one?
Yeah, you're the only one.
Well,
Jim,
and apparently in the
that's fine to hear
chambers.
you.
In the chamber.
I don't know.
Jim, can you hear me?
Raphael, I can hear you clear. I hear everybody except for Mary Jo.
Wow.
Oh, that is strange.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mary Jo. They're cutting you off.
Nicole, how about you? Can we hear you?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I can hear you, Mary Jo.
And I'm getting text here from county staff that they cannot hear Mary Jo on the broadcast.
Yeah, that's what Ryan said.
That is so odd.
Okay, I'm going to ask for an update to all of us.
And we're still live.
Exactly. Let's hold on.
We recessed, but we're still live.
Yep.
Correct. We can hear you. We can hear you. I don't know if Jim can. Can you, Jim? Jim cannot. All right. Thank you. And we'll hold on, and hopefully when you come back, we're all good. She's gone.
And I'm not sure. One of the texts was confusing, but I'm not sure if they can hear me on the live feed either.
Oh dear. They say they're working on it.
Oh, Ryan's raising his hand that he can hear you. It sounds like.
My aide is listening to the live feed and says she can hear everyone.
And
so.
we're all just chit-chatting live here. So,
Well,
yeah,
we're
let's
human
hold
beings,
on.
Tony. We chit chat.
Yes, we do.
So I don't know, I wish Mary Jo were on so that we could sing our happy birthday song to Jim today. This would be a good time to do it. No, we wouldn't be here. Happy
Well,
birthday.
Tony, you could just do that because the fact is we couldn't all sing at the same time anyhow.
Thanks.
All right. Good point. Good point. Happy birthday.
Okay, here I am. Can you all hear me now?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
You can hear me now?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Is the chambers able to hear Mary Jo as well?
Madam Chair, we can hear everybody. We're ready to go.
All right. I'm going to
Okay.
stay off my mic. I'm going to stay
Thank
off
you
my
very
headset. Okay.
We were in your comments, Commissioner McGuire.
Okay. So thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to say thank you to Commissioner Mattis Castillo for bringing this up. And I know that we have a policy of health in all policies, but it's always good to call this out and to find and to determine the actions that go along with this. So I'm very supportive of that. So thank you, Commissioner Mattis Castillo, for bringing that up. In line with that, I was just wondering, as we've got this great dashboard on our county website, that do we factor in, population size with numbers? So we show these numbers of we still have more we still have more whites with the virus, and we still have and it goes from there. Is there a chart that factors in, the percentage of population? It's really about percentages. This is the percentage of population that we have that are of a certain color, and then these are the numbers within that population. It's a factoring in that would show more accurately how communities of color are more disproportionately affected. I'm assuming that's there. We just don't always see it when you're doing that. And it's the same for communities. I would like to factor in population. Like we show that there's the most in Ramsey County, then Maplewood has the second most because it's the second highest in population. So is it just going to be that way, that the highest population is going to have the highest cases, or is it that maybe some that have a higher population have lower cases? So I'm just wanting to have those things factored in, and if you could just let me know that that's happening and I can go to the right chart, then that's great.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, thank you for the questions. I appreciate you letting me get to exercise my former policy director muscle for just a second on this one. So on the open data portal site that you saw earlier, there's a link at the top of that bar chart that says, it links you to the census data by race and ethnicity. And if you were to click on that, it'll allow you the opportunity to then see the different share of the population across areas. So your question is a good one about what is our percent. And so you can see here, while it goes horizontal relative to vertical, this gives you the different shares of the population. And so between looking at that and comparing it to the rates of infection or confirmed cases, you're then able to see the disproportionality. So right now in Ramsey County, 66% of all residents are white. When you see an infection rate below 66%, which you very much do on our COVID cases by race, that shows you that there are higher percentages spread out across other demographics in the county. On your question about geography and size, we would expect the same thing. If there was no disproportionate impact by geography, every community would have the same rate of infection regardless of the size of its population. So the percentage of people infected would look the same. However, because of factors like density, poverty, race, and race again being the top predictor, we can expect that cities in which we see higher proportions of people of color, higher rates of poverty, and higher rates of density, just because of the way in which this virus spreads, will likely have higher rates of infection than areas in which those factors look different. So on a high level, hopefully that's helpful. If there's more that we could answer there, please follow up.
I really appreciate channeling your inner policy your inner policiness there, County Manager. Thank you for that. I knew what I wanted to ask, but my policy background is a little outdated, so I didn't know all the right words to use. So thank you for that. And I think those are great charts to just make sure that we reference those, because they are the charts that then show what we're really talking about here with our disproportionality. So thank you so much for that.
And thank you, Commissioner McGuire. I will call on Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you, Chair Carter. And thank you, Trista. You took the words right out of my mouth. We, great minds think alike. I'll note that we did have a conversation last week with the Health and Wellness Service Team Director about moving forward. As I know some of our counterparts are in Hennepin County, Commissioners Conley and Fernando hope to move forward with a similar resolution declaring racism a public health crisis. And we have a meeting tomorrow with Kathy Hadeen, so looking forward to chatting with you, Kathy. I think, discussing those nuances and technicalities, as Ryan mentioned, is important, but also, as we had demonstrated just moments ago in our Pride Month proclamation, that our words matter, and being able to affirmatively say we recognize that our Black, Brown, and Indigenous residents suffer higher rates and disproportionate impacts, not only of COVID, but in many other health conditions, is meaningful, and that our work needs to filter through that lens, and that is important, that recognition in and of itself. So my office has been working on it. We'd love to partner with you, Trista, in moving forward with that, as well as engaged with our research team and our equity action circle. That's where we started trying to move within that circle before bringing it back to the rest of our colleagues, because we felt like that partnership was important. But just wanted to echo that and give an update that this is work in progress. And also thank you, Chair Carter, when I reached out to you a few weeks ago about this, for sharing the public health report done a few years ago, because I think that really informs that work.
You're on mute, Tony.
Thank you. I know that every member of our board, I saw heads nodding with respect to moving forward in this regard. Really want to thank those of you who have mentioned it, those who are working and will continue to work with public health. And thank you to our public health department for encapsulating this within a manner which will allow us to move forward not only with the declaration, but in a integrated fashion with the work that we are doing to uplift racism as a crisis for all of us as we move forward to resolve. It's a big charge, but everything that we are doing is so that we can, in fact, address this and other issues that will allow people to survive and thrive. Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to lend my support to this and then add a few comments here. I agree with Commissioner Frethman. Our words matter and they make a difference, but we do need to follow through in the action to demonstrate that it's more than just words. I don't want this to get lost in the nuances of, is it a public health crisis, a public health emergency, a public health use, whatever word you want to use, right? I can remember the conversations we had 20 years ago when we were really starting the work on sexual violence in our communities, and the effort back then to get sexual violence viewed as a public health issue and use the public health model to approach it, right? And it's a lot different than public health model is a preventative model, and it's a model to get ahead of and prevent harm in our community versus a crisis response for the most part. And in the end, we established sexual violence as a public health issue in our community. And the real reason that drove that is the driving issue for sexual violence in our community was truly white male privilege and power and the power and control over gender. And that is a systemic issue that needed to be dealt with in a public health model and way, just as racism is needed to be addressed in the same way because of the systemic issue about how racism is perpetuated in our communities. And so I want to make sure we don't get hooked up on words here and stay true to what we're really trying to accomplish. I'll also share, this was brought up yesterday at the SHAC meeting with Commissioner Malcolm. She shared the states looking at this. So I wanted, and I know Kathy was on that call, but making sure that we're touching base with the states to try to align maybe, or even help them even get as far as we can and as bold and as aggressive as what we're doing and what potentially with the state. Also share that at the national level, there's a number of counties nationally that have already done this, that we can get copies of resolutions and work that they've done. And then yesterday, the 10 policy chairs of NACO and the executive committee met to, and we took action to support a resolution through NACO for over 3,000 counties to support that will ask Congress to declare racism a public health issue and attaching it to policy and budget issues that move forward from there. So there's a lot of work going on out there that we can look to help inform us. But then again, in the end, I just don't want to get hooked up or trapped into words here and really stay focused in on what we're trying to accomplish. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that additional context and update also from the National Association of Counties, Jim. We will take our time through this and make certain that the words do not be lost, but that we're able to stay focused on the work that we need to do to ensure we get beyond this issue. Thank you all for your questions. Just checking in again. I do see a couple hands raised. Commissioner Reinhardt.
There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just really think that this is an important issue, obviously. And I also think that one of the things that we've done with the Transforming Systems Together, with our racial equity and community engagement response team, with our community committee that we just adopted or had the 9 community members on last week, that I think it's very clear that we are very serious about this and will move this forward. But as this with, and actually the next item that I know you're going to talk about, shining a light on things to make sure that everybody sees what it is, where the problem is, how you can prevent it, how you can deal with, how you react when it's very clear that it's such an important issue. I mean, it's from COVID to the George Floyd killing to, I mean, just everything, poverty, home ownership, all these things where the racism is just headed, you know, front and center on everything. So I think that we are poised and have worked on already, but we are really poised in a spot in Ramsey County where we will put action behind, because one thing that I'm really proud of our county board for doing is if we don't just put something on paper, we follow it up. And so I'm excited for this to come forward to us. Thank you.
So thank you all very much. Commissioner McGuire, I see your hand. You're on mute.
Thank you. Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
I put my headset back on. Okay. So thank you. And I just was reminded we're working now on the agenda for Healthy Counties. So I chair Healthy Counties for NACO, for our National Association, and we're part of the agenda will be featuring counties that have taken the action of declaring racism as a public health issue and how they're doing that. So we'll, by then, by the time the committee meets, there'll be lots more counties that have done this. So we'll have a lot of information to report. So thank you. And I'm glad we'll be among those that are doing that. So thank you.
And thank you very much. I believe that is all the questions and comments that we have related to our COVID-19 update. I want to thank you again, County Manager, for sharing this with us, and also Director Hadeen. And we are going to then move on into the balance of our work for today. This is a workshop day, and so we will be proceeding after our next section with our workshop on residents first, the second portion. But prior to that, I thank you for allowing, in addition to the agenda this past weekend, we, together with our community, reporting in the print and news media that there were allegations made regarding actions at the Sheriff's Department, the detention center, that concerned all of us and that are of high concern. This portion to our agenda. Let me just take a moment to share some thoughts that have been developed in consultation with all of you regarding what we have heard, but to set the stage for a discussion today where we will provide ample time for each board member to share your thoughts regarding what we will do moving forward in relationship to the alleged actions that we've heard about. So with the statement and open up to each board member, we want to conclude today by providing some direction to our county manager to continue or to execute on in order to assist us in moving. So as members of the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners, we're all appalled and angered that several Ramsey County employees of color were allegedly prevented from performing their professional responsibilities during the transport and detention of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin while he was held at the Ramsey County Detention Center. We stand united in apologizing to the employees involved and also in commending them for speaking up to demand the professional respect and human dignity that they are due. We call Sheriff Fletcher to swiftly address the offenses alleged and to take all steps necessary to ensure the professional, respectful, and equitable service delivery expected by and for all Ramsey County. Additionally, the Board of Commissioners recognizes that this moment is unfortunately now one in a series of concerning events highlights the need for systemic changes in the manner in which the Sheriff's Office is required to manage its operation. As an independently elected official, the Ramsey County Sheriff is directly accountable to Ramsey County voters and does not take direction from the Board of Commissioners or the county manager. Even so, with the full power of this body, the board will pursue transparency, accountability, and redress. Immediately upon learning of the allegations made by our employees, employment investigation was initiated by county management. We can make no further comment, however, about the in-process investigation. The Board of Commissioners has long committed to and continues working with our employees and community stakeholders to foster a culture that does not tolerate discrimination or racialized acts in our county and our community. As actions such as those alleged occur, together we will call them out and do our part to root them out as is necessary to achieve our vision of a vibrant community where all are valued and thrive. We also recognize that while the immediate focus must be on the Sheriff's Office, our collective efforts must encompass every area of our organization if we are truly to become a place in which all are valued and thrive. So knowing that our actions will speak louder than our words, we'll now dedicate a brief portion of our meeting to discuss further steps that we must take on behalf of our organization and our community. The status quo should never have been, and particularly now, is absolutely not acceptable. So at this point in time, I will turn to the screen to look for those who would have comments to share with us. Again, we are looking forward to your thoughts about our actions moving forward. And at the conclusion of your comments, we'll direct comments to the county manager to execute upon our discussion. Thank you. Commissioner McDonough. You're on mute or no?
Yep, no, I was just gathering my thoughts. Thank you. Yeah, well said, Tony, well said. And thanks for the opportunity for us to have the conversation here. I know we've talked about, or there's the possibility of going so many different directions in response to this. And I do want to, I'll raise a couple of things that I would be supportive of here moving forward in response, and I want to say a little bit more why that makes sense. You know, we have the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, which really takes a look at not only government, but us as a state in ensuring that individual rights are protected and people are held accountable when they're not. And this certainly could be the time when we actually get out ahead and suggest that the Minnesota Department of Human Rights comes in and not only takes, as you said earlier, a look at what this is incident, but what is going on within the county to have that outside perspective. So many times we're doing things for the right reasons, and we don't always recognize the collateral consequences of things that are occurring in our county, and I think it would be a good check-in, and I would be interested in the conversation of what that might look like. One of the issues that's been really problematic, you know, I was chair last year, Sheriff Fletcher's first year as chair since being elected. We knew we had a budget issue, you know, 2 months into that year, and the accountability and the working with that department last year, not only on the budget issue, but on so many things, was just almost impossible, and the unwillingness to even attend or participate in working together. And I would really look to the sheriff here that it's time for him to support aligning accountability of his office to the values of this county and working together with the county manager and the deputy county manager and the service team model that we've established that works so well for the rest of this county. But without the cooperation of the sheriff, has really suffered and caused some harm in this county. And then I really think it's time for our community, our residents, the folks that live in Ramsey County, to be able to have a conversation around, is having an elected sheriff really the best way to address public safety and be held accountable in this community? Police chiefs are appointed throughout the state, and I'm not saying it's always a better model by any means, but if you look at it from a transparency and accountable model, there's so much more there when an individual that has that kind of authority and that kind of power and that kind of impact in the community to at least have some accountability to a management system, in this case a county manager, and to an elected board such as the Ramsey County Board, versus total authority, total autonomy, and no accountability to anybody except for every 4 years when he runs or she runs for office. And I think it's time for us to have that conversation as a community. And what does that look like? You know, using the ability of us being the only home rule charter county in the state, or even having a conversation with legislators in public safety reform, and what does that look like in true comprehensive public safety reform? And I want to just, I don't want to look backwards. I do want to focus on the present and moving forward, but I want to bring up a few issues to explain why I support this. Because there is this pattern of abuse of power that just has continued for 18 months. And even when Sheriff Fletcher was a sheriff over 8, 9, 10 years ago. You know, it's been reported, you know, that he's allowed his, you know, for a better word, cronies or special people to retire. And within 30 days, he brings them back on at full salary. And they're collecting pensions. The lack of transparency and accountability, and just the disregard to how we manage and are accountable and responsible with taxpayer dollars. You know, we worked really hard to terminate 2 employees, extremely hard. Spent tens of thousands of dollars on that. And just recently, he rehired both of them. His chief deputy testified to the arbitrator on why we should not have to rehire these employees 2 years ago when the arbitrator was making a decision on whether the county had to do that or not. And the arbitrator, in a really rare decision, for the most part, which we're starting to see and understand here, not only in this, is he stood behind the county in that. But those 2 employees were rehired under this sheriff. One of them for sending hundreds of white supremacist, racist emails on a county computer, on county time, to county employees. And the harm and trauma it caused in this county when that occurred, but imagine the harm and trauma and when the sheriff decided to hire this individual back, what that caused to these individuals. The other employee was fired and terminated for stealing wages, recording false time, stealing taxpayer dollars, abusing our system, and was brought back to work in that same system that he so successfully, in his viewpoint, abused for years in stealing wages. We, and when I say we, I mean the county manager, his team, and this county board work hard to protect the taxpayers from huge budget overruns. In 2019, as I mentioned before, for 10 months, the sheriff refused to work with the county to eliminate the projected budget overrun for the most part. There was a few meetings, but for the most part, he really would not work with us and recognize it. Refusing to meet at the same time, making decisions that exasperated his financial shortfall, making hires, investing in bikes. I mean, the list goes on and on. It continued to spend money knowing that his budget was going to come in at, a potential $1 million or more in the shortfall. Then at the last meeting of the year, he brings the Statue of Peace to the meeting, knowing full well the county board had no choice in approving the $1 million overspent in his budget. What Bob do we believe in? The one that is holding a peace statue, or the one allowing and encouraging discrimination, racial bias, and racism and cronyism to flourish in his operation? The Bob that calls me to talk about police reform and leads with, we have to look at who we hire and how we hire, or the Bob that hires individuals who have demonstrated the lack of values, that have demonstrated values and behavior that is totally at odds with the values of this county. The true test of character is what we do when we think no one is watching. In my opinion, Mr. Fletcher thinks no one is watching, and he fails the test of character. That's why I support the chair's recommendation for us to have this conversation about what are the next steps, for us to be bold, to ask the Department of Human Rights to come in and look and see and hold us accountable for what is happening in our county. I support changes in the management structure and the relationship with the sheriff's office, and I hope the sheriff supports that too, in a real meaningful way. I support the opportunity for the public to have a say in appointed versus elected sheriff. I am angered and saddened that with all the good work this county is moving forward on, that we spend so much time on the harm this sheriff is causing in our community. It just sucks the air out of the room. I will end sharing, I have been contacted by members of the community, which I know all of you have. And some are employees, some work in the jail, some are our deputies that work on the street, and some are community members that are watching and are paying attention, and they feel the same way. One outreach from a jail employee, and this is a direct quote: racism runs rampant throughout the jail. And I'm going to read feedback I got from a community member. I believe most of you did receive the same. But in some ways, this community member can't say it, says it so much better than how I could say it. Hello, I'm taking time out of my day to tell you that Ramsey County needs to get their house in order. It is unconscionable that the superintendent, Steve Leiden, removed black officers from interacting with Chavez, including one officer already in the process of admitting him. Do you understand how condescending that is? This action says he thinks the officers, one, were unable to act professionally. This would never happen with white officers, and is an indication of why people are in such a rage right now. The racism in policing and corrections runs so deep, and they are so oblivious to their own thinking, that a debacle like this is allowed to happen in this racially charged climate. I cannot understand how completely infuriating this is. I am a white, middle-class, middle-aged woman. If I were a person of color, it would be exponentially worse, I'm sure. And then I find out the person in charge, who says he's reviewing the matter to see if any additional actions are necessary, is Sheriff Bob Fletcher, the man who can't control his own budget and has to beg the county board for additional $1 million of taxpayer dollars, and then turns around and rehires 2 corrections officers previously fired for misconduct who campaigned for him. This is why we're in this state right now. Policing and corrections is rotten to the core. It's old boys club of the very worst kind. Do the right thing. Be the change. Get your house in order and pressure everyone you can to throw out the bad, who have shown themselves to be so thoroughly entrenched in corruption and the systemic oppression of Black people that we do not have time to redeem them. Do something. The world is watching. And you know, the statement, policing and corrections is rotten to the core, is pretty harsh. And I really don't believe it's rotten to the core. I believe we have a ton of good people trying to do extremely good work, and we're making progress. But that work is hindered and damaged when things and incidences like this come up. And then people use that broad paintbrush. That's not always justified. But those actions, such as Steve Leiden and his removal of those Black officers, do so much harm to the good work that we are trying to do in this county. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts here. I'm looking forward to my colleagues and your thoughts. But it's time for us as a board to take action, to show the sheriff, not only are we watching, but we are holding people accountable. And it's time to demonstrate to our employees and to the community that we take this serious and we care and you matter. Thank you.
Commissioner McDonough, thank you for your thoughts and comments, for the questions you've raised, conclusions about which we cannot all make here today, but importantly for the directions that you are supporting, as it is important to share what we can do and to do what we can do moving forward. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Jim. That was very heartfelt, obviously. I also support the human rights, state human rights coming in and not only looking at what is currently happening in the sheriff's office, but further than that, within our own operations. I mentioned in the last section about shining a light, and we've never been afraid to do that. And we need to make sure that we are open to seeing what's happening throughout our county so that we can make the change that we have talked about and are working towards. We put a number of efforts into play, but we need to make sure that we're getting the right work done. And having that information would be very helpful. So I'm very supportive of that. I do remember the Charter Commission, because we are a home rule charter, did bring forward the idea of the sheriff being appointed probably about 10 years ago or so. And I think that that is worth revisiting. And so I would also ask or second the idea that the county manager look at, whether it's through the legislature or through the Charter Commission, how we could let the voters have a say in that, and how that would move forward. So I would like to have that information as far as direction in going forward. I think it is just, and you're right, Commissioner McDonough, we all did get that letter, and it was very sobering and very concerning. I mean, to say that, I mean, Chair Carter, you did such a fantastic job. And by the way, your video or your audio was cutting out. I hope that the entirety of your statement will be posted on our website for others to read and to hopefully hear as well. But it was cutting out, and it was so powerful, and I want to make sure that others can hear that. But I think that we need to, we just need to really take it head on, shine the light, figure out what we need to do. And we need to have accountability in the Sheriff's Department. And quite frankly, it's very clear that it's not there. But we will see, you know, we've got the investigation, and I know that we are doing a separate investigation. I believe that's what you said. And that is something that's going to be really critical too, because that is the normal process that we go through. We don't have the department head be you know, in this case, the elected official, checking out on their own work. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And so a full investigation is critical. So there's so much more that I could say, but we need to make change here. And that is, you know, we are the change. We need to be the change we wish to see in the world. And that's where we're at right now. And I am fully supportive of moving forward wherever that may take us, because it's the only way we can make the change that we need to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt, for your comments. I'll go to Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you, Chair Carter. Again, thank you for your statement and the opportunity to provide input into it. It has been a very hard few days dealing with this and the frustration. And I came into this office recently. I did not know Sheriff Fletcher before this. And, you know, as Jim noted, he has been saying some really good things. And so cautiously hopeful that change has happened and that he is wanting to do better for the community, and yet knowingly concerned on two issues, and they are his ability to manage the budget due to past issues in his last term as sheriff, and his ability to police equitably based on his history with the Metro Gang Strike Force. And it's very telling that the issues that have come up in our meetings are related to ability to govern in an equitable way for our people of color and residents of color and staff of color, and budget issues. I can believe that Sheriff Fletcher really wants to be doing better, and his staff are acting potentially with a positive intent. But assuming positive intent does not mean that we don't hold people accountable for their extremely harmful actions. And there's and these allegations are absurd. Every supervisor should know that you cannot change someone's work duties or work assignments because solely based on that person's race. That is Civil and Human Rights 101. Like, there is no excuse for that. And so I do hope that we can explore ways to hold the sheriff accountable within the existing power that we have. I do feel it's a broader discussion, and it shouldn't be just about this sheriff. Oh.
I just wanted to check in, Commissioner Fretham. You cut out for me. I was not aware of your last sentence. Could you just repeat your last sentence?
Oh, so the last sentence I said is, I think we should be treating this question of the sheriff as elected office as a separate issue from our currently elected sheriff. This is a structural issue in our community conversation. And I think it is a meaningful one. I think, you know, as I reflect on this, we have a separately elected attorney. That to me makes sense. Getting legal advice from an unbiased source, and being able to trust that our folks like Jeff are able to provide us advice that is honest, and that their job doesn't depend on telling us what we want to hear. I don't understand that with the sheriff. You know, I think people more broadly recognize right now in this moment that policing is just one aspect of what it means to create public safety. So why is that aspect separated from things like housing and mental health support? It doesn't make sense and to have that separate from the rest of our mission. And I do hope our Charter Commission can explore that and our community can have these conversations about what structure makes sense to move forward with transformational change. I would also support asking our Department of Human Rights to do an independent investigation that more broadly looks at the culture within our sheriff's office and correctional services to ensure that we fully understand the scope of the issues we're trying to address. We cannot move forward towards our vision until we know where we're at right now. So, thank you.
Commissioner Fretham, thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. Commissioner Matas-Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to echo a few comments. Obviously, I also support moving in a direction to really take a look at what we can do differently. Like everyone else, I was shocked to hear about the incident over the weekend. I think the most heartbreaking thing for me is to see that it was Ramsey County in front of the incident. And it really gave me a moment to pause to not only in my outrage of what happened within the sheriff's department, but along with the letter sent by our community members, and I received many calls and letters about this, but it is a moment for all of us to take notice and to really make sure our own houses are in order at the same time. So countywide, I know we have been talking about this a lot, but racism is rampant in our universe. And at every single aspect of it, we need to call it out and get rid of it. And so I hope that everyone listening takes notice of this. And if you are a Ramsey County employee, we won't tolerate that. And we're going to root it out, because it truly is the evil that is spoiling a really, really great Ramsey County. As for the Sheriff's Department, we have seen this over and over and over and over. And both in the economics of it's costing us a lot of money, in his failures in leadership, but we also need to make sure that we have oversight in many ways. Since I came into this office, I have been pleading for an oversight committee on policing that is outside of our organization, and I continue to say we need to do that. We need to make sure that we truly have oversight about policing. And it is not just for the community, but it protects our officers as well. And these officers, these employees of the detention center were discriminated, were informed that they were saying they're discriminated against. I'm just so angry, my words won't come out. But we really need to think about how we can protect them. And so I want to, as we are continuing this conversation, and support a thorough outside investigation about policies and practices, both internally and externally, that we consider all of our options. I think it is long past time that we just let things play out and that we take real meaningful action. And so I would absolutely support an investigation and having the county manager investigate all options to us, whether that is through our charter commission, through legislation, or any other means necessary, quite frankly. You know, the one tool we have at our disposal here is around the budget, and we know that it hasn't been all that effective because he has overspent. And so I would also like us to consider if there's other ways to do sanctions, when this stuff happens, because apparently the only way it's going to be felt is in the pocketbook. And so I really want us to think about this and to put all of our resources on the table. I recently had a conversation with the sheriff when Falcon Heights, a community I represent, had concerns and wanted to have a facilitated community conversation about policing. They had the death of Philando Castile just not that long ago, and then the murder of George Floyd, really bringing up all of those issues again, and wanted to have a conversation. I reached out to him and offered it, which he said he would consider. But in our conversation, he shared with me the way he's thinking about it. And he said that to me, it was three things. It was who we hire, how we train them, and how we supervise them. And I have to tell you, this came out just after that. And so I'm thinking to myself, yeah, it is those three things. So now what are we going to do about it? It's about who we hire and or appoint. It is about how we train them and how we supervise them. But when it comes from the top, we have a critical failure. And so I really think that we need to put all of our tools on the table and figure out how we're going to do that. So thank you very much.
Commissioner Matas-Castillo, thank you also for your comments. And again, as we are discussing the alleged actions and the work that we might be able to do, forgive me for continuing to push my camera, I was trying to push my mic, the work that we may be able to do. This is within the context of those alleged actions and any other concerns that we see. So I will call on Commissioner Ryan. Again.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify one thing, and I'm glad that it was brought up because sometimes you forget the full context when you're talking about things. But one thing is, with the Charter Commission and the recommendation on an appointment, that would not be for the current sheriff. It would have to be at the next election. I believe that's the way it was brought forward before. But that also means that the other things that we need to do for accountability right now have to be a part of that. And so I wanted to reinforce what Commissioner Fretham said about, it's for another time as far as the appointed position. But I think that everything that we do right now, trying to make sure that we have accountability with the current sheriff, plays into that. But the Charter Commission and when that would go into effect would have to be, I believe anyhow, the following election cycle. But, the fact of the matter is we need to have that accountability now and into the future. And so I look at it more as a two-pronged approach. Plus, I do like the idea of the commission and trying to put certain things in place right now that we can to make sure that we can have better outcomes. It's just, we have to do it. We have to figure it out. And I know this is putting a lot on the county manager, but these issues are pretty straightforward in many ways. And we just need to methodically figure out how we can regain some accountability within the sheriff's office and within the rest of our county as well. Thank you. But I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you for the clarification. Moving back to Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also add my thanks to you and this entire board for having this conversation, which is really important. We are trying to do such good work. And then when something like this happened, and we were all hit hard this weekend when the sheriff's incident happened, and we know we're better than this. And so we really have to look at what's going on and how we can help change that. So I absolutely join my colleagues in supporting an investigation, both internally and with the Department of Human Rights, to look at the sheriff and throughout our county, definitely the sheriff's office, but throughout everything that we're doing to make sure that racism and race equity is looked at in how we are aligning our policy with our operations. And so that is what we need to start with and do that. We would need to engage our community to help us continue to do this work. I know we've lost some trust again, and we need to rebuild that. And we are really needing to work on that. I have been hearing, as all of you, from many people in the community who want us to do this work, and I think we can't do it soon enough. I add my support to taking a look, and this is a future conversation, obviously a future action for looking at appointed versus elected sheriff. I think we are held accountable. We're held accountable whether it's in the sheriff's office or not. So our board needs to be able to hold that position accountable, and we can do it better if we're able to have some say in that sheriff's position. Because as we know with the budget, we're able to hold the sheriff accountable with parts of the budget, and we will. But we need to be able to hold that position accountable in other ways. And so I absolutely support looking at that position as elected versus appointed, and what we can do about that. So I would just say thank you for all of this conversation. I know we're aligned as a board and as a county to have this, and whatever we can do as a board to move this along as fast as possible is what we need to do. Thank you.
All right, I am unmuted, and we'll look back at the participant screen. Thank you, Commissioner McGuire. Calling on Commissioner Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to thank all my colleagues. Being the oldest member on this board, when I came here over 20 years ago, 25 to be exact, it was quite a different culture and environment. And at that time, I very publicly on one of our meetings said we are a racist institution, but I am now a member of the board, and I am responsible for changing this racist institution. And I'm very proud. I intentionally stayed silent and waited for everybody else to speak, because I'm very proud that you, my colleagues, are sharing this burden, because it has been a burden to some of us when we first came here. And so I just want to let you know that we've come a long way. We have not been standing still, and while we still have issues, and there's always going to be a lot of work to do in this area, we have come a long way. And I thank you all for all your comments and your leadership. It's great from my perspective to see that I could sort of help lead from the rear rather than from the front. The other thing I want to say is that just to resonate a little bit with what everybody said, Trista, I agree with you in terms of how we hire, how we train, and how we supervise. But the other issue is how we fire. We should be able to fire folks that are not professional, regardless of race or color, and doing their job. I support all of the above. We need to seize the moment. We don't get many of these windows. I think we have a society, a community that very much of all coming from all different places that are saying enough is enough, and this is the time to bring change. I support that we put in a full court press, that we do all of the above, that we look at the charter. Maybe the charter needs to be changed, that we push for legislation, not just in terms of race, but in terms of some of how we're handcuffed and our ability to fire some of these folks that are not competent, not professional in serving our community. So I just want to come forward and say thank you. I say move forward on all fronts. This is not a matter of choice. And not to be, there are going to be barriers. And if we have to do things, rather than saying, well, the charter doesn't allow us to do this or that, take on the bigger task of changing the charter. Do what we have to do. Do it all. Seize the moment. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Ortega, also for your comments. I do see Commissioner Fretham's hand is raised again.
Thank you, Chair Carter. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you, Victoria, Commissioner Reinhardt. I am not saying this discussion of the charter should happen at a later time. I think these are simultaneous conversations. For me, it's more about depoliticizing the discussion about how we structure public safety and within our community from Sheriff Fletcher. This is a broader discussion that I think we've been having as a state, as a country, as a planet about what does it mean to be safe in our communities, and recognition that policing is just a small part of it. So having a separately elected police chief, which, as someone else had noted, really seems very unique to counties. Our military is under our executive branches. Our cities appoint their police chiefs. So it's odd that we have this separate structure here in Ramsey County and across counties. So why do we do that? Do we need it? What does it give us? And what would changing that provide us in terms of community safety? I think that is a discussion that we should be having with our community, but that it's separate from whether or not we like our existing sheriff, because some communities may like their existing sheriffs or not, but it's still a worthwhile conversation to have. That doesn't stop us from holding Sheriff Fletcher and his department accountable using the means that we have, and that those aren't, we'll do one then the other. I think we should be doing both now, but really thinking about more broadly, how do we have this discussion in relation to our vision of a vibrant community where all are valued and thrive, and does our current model support that vision? Thank you.
Tony, you're on mute.
Okie doke, then I'll call on you since you pointed that out. Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you. And I know you're getting ready to wrap this up, and looking forward to your thoughts and comments, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to do this, but Nicole, you stated it well, and I just want to reinforce, the issue about appointing a versus isn't about an individual. I've been the county commissioner through 3 sheriffs. All 3 have mismanaged their budget. All 3 have had major racial incidences under their watch. And so really it is more about a structural change in accountability and operation, and not about an individual. It's just the time for this to have this conversation, I think, is right. I came back. I don't usually come back for second rounds, but I'm doing it this time because this time it's personal. Some of you know, many of you don't. Bob Fletcher and I were great friends at one time. I strongly supported the work that Bob did in this community. I watched him and I worked with him, and many East Side kids in Ramsey County families benefited from that work. Our kids played on the same sports teams. His daughter spent nights at my house. My daughter spent nights at her house. I went to his wedding. We were friends, and I believed in him. I truly believed in him. But I also was close enough to see the rot. And I didn't say nothing, right? I mean, it was always kind of, well, this is good stuff. This isn't so good. Let's focus over here. Let's minimize. Let's dismiss. Let's overlook what's going on over here. And in some ways, my actions caused more harm in this community than the actions of the rot, because I didn't speak up. I didn't speak out, seeing what I seen. And Bob, where you lost me, and Nicole, you mentioned the gang strike task force. That's where you lost me, and that's when I started speaking out, because I could no longer watch the rot. The largest racial profiling effort ever in this state occurred in this county. Under your watch, under your leadership, hundreds of mostly men of color pulled over in their cars, their homes entered, no search warrants, cars taken, money taken, jewelry taken, dining room tables taken, washing machines taken, refrigerators taken, personal property, never charges, never arrests, all under the guise of protecting the community when it was a blatant racial effort to steal wealth from a community that had very little. All that wealth, none of it, or very little of it, ended up in your property room, and you had the responsibility to ensure it did. And what did ended up being sold for pennies on the dollar to your deputies. And you lost me there, Bob. You lost me, and you'll never get me back. You know, towards the end of your term last time, 2 of your top deputies went to prison for 5 years under your watch. You know, you hired a retired high school teacher to be your communications director, and he's tried to convince you for 18 months that this is Bob Fletcher version 3.0, and that this is Bob Fletcher who's learned from his past, and this is Bob Fletcher who wants to do good in our community. And what I say to that is, Bob Fletcher, you may be 3.0, but it's not about doing good in our community. It's you've just gotten better at convincing our community you want to do good and you want to be a part of it. And you've gotten better at hiding the rock. And you've gotten better at protecting. You've gotten better at protecting the individuals that create harm in our community. And I'm not, for one, going to stand by and be silent anymore. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Tony, you're muted.
Right.
Tony, you should, yeah.
Thank you.
And so you should start over because we didn't hear, yeah, any.
So I want to thank each one of you for your very candid comments as we have discussed the alleged actions that have recently brought concern to all of us and to our communities, and that within the context of experiences of the past that we have had, move us toward determining the actions that we can take beyond the words that we've expressed today that will help ensure that we can move toward that vibrant community that we talk about, where all are valued and thrive, and that it is so important to realize. We have had the opportunity, since hearing the news along with our community this weekend, to talk a little about this, to think through the areas of action we might take. And our conversations today, our comments today, tend to confirm those areas. So I do want to wrap up as we have shared to categorize a set of steps and actions that we can take. We have talked together, and we have also shared. I have had the opportunity to work with the county manager over the past couple of days to consolidate into a set of actions that I will now share. It is important that we know that as we look to take these actions, it is because we are so very serious in our efforts together in our county and with our community to uphold our commitment to racial equity and to organizational excellence across all of Ramsey County. So, first, as we recognize that the media has reported that there is a civil rights complaint regarding our Ramsey County Sheriff's Office already in front of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, Ramsey County leadership would now request that the Human Rights Department conduct a broad review of the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office practices, policies, and procedures, and with the freedom to investigate other aspects of Ramsey County's organization if needed to fully conduct that review. It must be said that we have not had the conversation that we will need to have with the Minnesota Department of Rights to determine what is possible. And we will do that. We will do that shortly. But by formally requesting this review and our willingness to partner in ensuring it moves forward, We are seeking to root out those inequitable practices and to address any past missteps in the most transparent and the most accountable way possible for this, our public organization. That is the first step. The second area is that the board requests that the sheriff will immediately repurpose a vacant position in order to title it Trust and Accountability Officer. The Trust and Accountability Officer would be hired to serve as a direct report to the Deputy County Manager within the Safety and Justice team. That position would work closely with the county's Chief Compliance and Ethics Officer, who appoints or who reports directly to the county manager. The Trust and Accountability Officer will ensure that the county board's vision, mission, and goals are carried into and across the entire operation of the sheriff's office with the freedom and the authority to identify to the deputy county manager areas in which inconsistencies in policy, practice, or procedure exist. The officer would work then with the deputy county manager and the broader community to create a public reporting mechanism by which the county board is regularly updated on partnership and progress, instilling a proactive approach to preventing future instances from occurring, such as those that have been alleged in the incident that we read about in the press this past weekend. Those two above actions demonstrate that the county is serious, that this board is serious in changing the way in which one area of Ramsey County can operate outside of the county's vision, mission, and goals, and our values. However, in order to fully address the issue, a more significant structured change must be considered. And as we have heard from those in our community, the desire to entertain such a structured change, the county board will therefore be evaluating our home rule charter and pertinent legislation to identify the appropriate process by which the community can reevaluate whether an elected or an appointed sheriff is most appropriate to provide transparent, accountable, and effective and equitable public safety services across Ramsey County. So following today's meeting, in accordance with our discussion, and I must note that although I have not summarized every detail of our discussion, these are the three areas within which recommendations and work can proceed, such as we have discussed. So after the meeting today, I am asking the county manager to begin executing against the actions outlined above and to continue to update the county board on a regular basis so that we can all remain involved in this important work to build a community in which all are valued and thrive. So again, thank you so much for your comments and participation in this discussion. It was necessary to add it to our agenda as it is impacting upon all of our community, and we are hearing the need to tell the work that we can do in that regard. We will continue to hear from the county manager. That concludes our discussion. And now we can move forward to the balance of our agenda. I would like to take the prerogative as chair to ask, as usual, for a brief moment of silence as we recognize the losses that we have been suffering, and that our community has been suffering during COVID-19. We'll take a brief moment as we transition into our workshop, for which I'll call on the county manager. Brief moment of silence. Thank you all very much. County manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, just based on the transition and not wanting to move during the moment of silence and the conversation we're coming off, could I request of you a 3-minute transitionary break and then we jump directly in?
Most absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
the
you,
break,
Madam Chair.
and we will see you back in 3 minutes. conversation was necessitated by the need of the Ramsey County Board to ensure that we are fighting just as hard for you as we would as we are lifting up this cause of equity and justice across our entire organization. So we hope that you recognize, we all support you in your day-to-day work. And, if in fact there is a need, please know that the assistance you need is available to you. I'll turn to the county manager.
Am I up? Sorry, Madam Chair, I did not quite hear you on the turnover piece, but thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. We are back, and I'll be presenting from up here at the screen. I have a dead monitor in front of me that we're going to be working on getting fixed, but I therefore am going to be speaking to you without being able to physically see you, and I will do my best. We'll have the PowerPoint up on the screen for most of the way as we go anyway. We are back today to talk about follow-up to the Residents First board workshop that we had 2 weeks ago. There were some specific questions, particularly as it relates to the Navigator model and how we look at moving that ahead, that we wanted to come back and spend some time with you on today. Based on the time in front of us and having about an hour to have that conversation, I will move very quickly through some of the slides. Please stop me, Madam Chair, if you want to slow down on any of them. But I'd like to focus as much of our time as possible on the Navigator aspects of the presentation, specific to the areas where we are seeking some feedback from the board here today. And so what I'll do is I'll actually present some of the information, and then when we come to the discussion slide, I will slide back to my seat so I can see all of you during that part of the discussion. I think that'll be helpful to ensuring that we can hear that feedback, take notes, and respond in real time. I'll turn to the PowerPoint that was provided to you in your board packet titled Residents First Board Workshop, June 23rd, 2020. As you remember from the previous workshop, there had been 2 goals. These were the 2 goals. And today, as we really look at this, we're going to spend some time looking at more detail around the unified strategy and obtaining the board's feedback, as I just mentioned, on some critical characteristics of the Navigator role and how we want to ensure that those characteristics make their way into our next steps. A lot of people want to talk a lot about next steps, and it's important for us to start first by saying what it is we are hoping to develop. What is the vision that we want to lay out? What are the characteristics we want to see? For example, empathy was a word that came out loud and clear at our last board workshop. We want to define those traits and characteristics up front so then we can hire and train to that as opposed to figure those pieces out later. The incident management team has a scope of work related to service design, and this was the charge that I shared with you last time. In the incident, because of the coronavirus response, it's around developing a unified countywide approach to Ramsey County service delivery. It is starting within the COVID response, but as we discussed at length last time, this aligns with the Residents First strategic facilities, strategic policies, programs, procedures, effort that all began before coronavirus and will be with us after the incident is over. And so while right now the incident management team has a role in this, just know that there's a long-term vision and a sustainability plan that will move it away from the incident response as we go ahead. There are certain elements to the work around being efficient, effective, accessible, and equitable in the way we serve. There's the establishment of the 5 service centers that we mentioned last time. By way of recap, Plato Office Building, Ramsey County Government Center East, and 3 libraries. The Ramsey County Libraries in Maplewood, Shoreview, and Roseville. The development of the countywide Navigator role, a lot more on that as we go today. Technology and tools to support this work is obviously a large component of being able to move in the direction we want to go and get to where we want to be. There's also this resident access to technology need that moves outside of our facilities. We will end there today with some comments back. And then loud and clear, this came up last time. We need to support our staff through the change in front of us, recognizing that future workspaces and culture change doesn't just happen because we hope it happens. It doesn't happen because we demand it happens. It happens because we work together to make it happen. And that means we, as in the board, the county manager, senior leadership, frontline staff, and everybody in between, in partnership with the community, is the way to truly make that happen. So as we turn back to the topic of the county navigator and development, if we think of Ramsey County today, we're going to take that one vision, one mission, one door approach and vision that we discuss, and we're going to apply that to today and where we want to go. If we're being honest with ourselves, we do not have a one-door approach to how we serve in Ramsey County. We still see a predominantly department-focused service approach that does not make sense to or benefit a resident. You all know this through your conversations. In community, we have heard the same many times. Ultimately, this puts the burden on our residents to understand the complexity of our system. They need to understand their options, meaning what they want and what they need in order to go out and get it. So if you break it down a different way, you can see in that chart at the top, residents oftentimes, or a resident, will have to navigate service A, B, C, and D, none of which are exactly the same, none of which are aligned around a duplicative way in which you might experience it. And so you see that navigating the system becomes a huge component. We often call that a siloed approach. There are different options and approaches based on departments and how we have worked. And even the county doesn't always fully understand the relationships within our own system. Meaning if I were to go ask someone in social services how the system works for somebody in workforce solutions, or how the system works for somebody calling in to talk to public works, or someone working with the county attorney's office, our knowledge often stops at the walls of our department. We do not see it through the lens of Ramsey County as a unified experience, which is much of why when you began the work around residents first and the idea of where you wanted to go, I would hope that this resonates with you as putting into words much of what you have been sharing with us along the way. Put in a different model, moving away from those silos to more of like a bubble flowchart piece. If you put a family at the center, you can see all the ways that you are then asked to web out to engage in different ways across our system. And all of these webs represent a potentially different service, a potentially different worker, a potentially different environment, a potentially different interaction. And this is what builds unnecessary complexity into systems. And while it's easy to say that and then say, let's streamline it, there's obviously significant work to make that move from vision to reality. So in the future, we took the number of doors and you make it one door. The goal being any door is the right door. And a resident sees a reflection of themselves in their interaction with the county. These are not small words. The navigator is a key part of that experience, with the hope that that individual will understand the needs of the resident, provide them with service options, and connect them to the appropriate service or services that they are seeking. It truly takes the complexity of the system, which will always be complex in a 4,000-person organization working across more than 20 different lines of service, and it will shift the complexity from the burden on the resident to being a part of the burden on the county to help navigate that component. There's 3 phases to the work as we think about it, and this has been important for us as an organization. As we talk about the navigator model, conceptually, we do not have a lot of pushback to the idea that we could do more, we should do more, we must do more to move the complexity of the system to become our burden as opposed to the person coming in our doors. It's really not where the concern happens. The concern comes in around the how do we go from today to that state in a way in which the entire system doesn't implode upon itself. And so we've worked to try and articulate this in a way that talks about the short, medium, and long term. And you can see by the dates here, long term is not all that long. I'm not saying out beyond 2030. We need to move with speed and with haste through all of this. But we also need to recognize as we manage through a pandemic, as we work through the budgetary scenarios in front of us, if we do not phase the work, we run that risk of saying and promising lots of things and then not ensuring that we deliver on them up to the level that we know we all need to. In the short term, the goal has been 4 departments. We've talked about that: social services, workforce solutions, financial assistance services, and property tax and revenue. Temporary roles, as we learn the model, will be a part of the goal. It's about the skills, and we want to begin to build out the program. We don't want to sit in a room for a long time thinking about what we want to roll out. We want to begin to roll it out and learn as we go. However, even during that rollout phase, there are some things that we want to make the focus immediately. with the navigators. We want to focus on sharing empathy and recognizing that while things will be transactional in the way business gets conducted out of the gate, that empathetic approach as a first step makes a huge deal. A culture of empathy, solutions focused, and residents first from day one changes the fundamental ethos by which the interaction begins. To be clear, this is not where we want to be, but it's a commitment to change, and it demonstrates first steps towards where we want to go. In the midterm, which becomes next year, more departments become integrated. Community and county will collaboratively shape the navigator role for the long term. We're looking to do a more temporary interim approach to get us to the end of this year in that navigator space, with a long-term description and unit being built out in 2021. And we want the community and the county to both feel bought into that process of those characteristics and skills. Ongoing systems improvement becomes a part of the culture. A team of permanent navigators, as I mentioned, and the focus of the navigator begins to shift from being transactional to transformative, warm handoffs, and deeper engagement. I should add, as you move from left to right across this slide, you don't drop the things you talked about before. So empathy remains throughout all three areas, but now we take it to the next level and we build transformational transactions into the work and move beyond the transactional. As we look at the longer term, 2022 and beyond, the large systems overhauls have been done, and we start to center residents in the middle and place. Community partners are hopefully identified and share space and participate in this approach. We've already had the courts express their interest and willingness to want to be a partner to this work as we move forward. That was a takeaway from our last county courts committee. And the navigator focus really turns beyond even just being someone who's there to help in a transformational way. It becomes a resident advocate and trusted partner. Big words and a lot that we need to do to get there, but we truly believe that we are poised to do these big things. As I mentioned in the initial steps, and I want to start there, we must be able to walk before we can run, because we know if we run past these core foundational tenets around empathy, residents first, solutions driven, we risk never enculturating that in the work that we do. So we want to initially focus on building the hard and soft skill set of navigators. We want to start with those 4 services that I already mentioned, and this really does allow us to learn our way in and grow the role as capacity becomes available. Here are some of the different components that we're hoping in terms of the strong baseline of understanding by the end of this summer. So during the months of July and August, building this work up to ensure that this strong baseline is in place. And then you can see some of the initial pieces around the role of a navigator: to be welcoming, a champion of equity, transactional, but trying to move beyond that, program awareness and connection. And what I can tell you is we have seen glimmers of this excellence happen throughout our organization over time already. It is not as though we've never seen this. What we have not done is take it to scale as a county and say, let's make this the expectation of how every interaction should work. So as I mentioned, getting from here to there is a big part of the process. We continue to mention it needs to be an iterative process. We don't want to stay stuck in neutral. We want to begin to move, but we want to be able to reflect as we go. And that requires that community and users be a part of the feedback and evaluation, because what we learn over the next 6 months very much drives what happens in the following 12, 24, and 36. There are questions that we're asking staff to try and help us tell from their perspective what comes in. We're identifying future services of what would come in next after these first 4 departments. Who do we think is most ready to implement? How do you balance small departments with the large, complex departments as a part of rolling that in? And how do we think about making sure that subject matter experts are available, whether a department has physically moved in or not? Even when we start with 4 departments, the goal is that those navigators and individuals on site will have the ability to access a wide array of the county's services, even if those services are not technically yet fully embedded on site. That's been a part of how we've dealt with the coronavirus response, and so we want to take that lesson learned and bring it to this model as well. And again, we are looking at other jurisdictions where we can to build out this model. There is a part where we need to be comfortable going in a direction in which we are leaders in an area where others haven't maybe blazed a trail for us. But we also don't have so much hubris as to think that nobody else has had a conversation around integrated service delivery, unified walk-up sites, What does residents first mean? And so we want to learn from the best wherever we can, and then we want to build upon it to ensure that our residents are getting the best here at home. I want to move into these two questions with you, Madam Chair, and so I'm going to read them off, and this is where I'm going to transition back to my seat for a few minutes. We would like to walk through these with you, and I would ask if maybe you'd be willing to help take us around. But we're here to take notes and listen, and you can see the two questions on the board. I'll read them briefly. What personal qualities and experience do you believe a navigator should have in order to be effective in this role? And if the county's navigator model becomes successful over time, what should we be able to see and hear from those we serve? Said differently, how will we know if our model is working well? We're asking these questions, as I mentioned, to a lot of different sources right now, but one of those sources is all of you. And if anyone would like to say we would prefer to send those comments in, that's totally okay. But we wanted to pause on this today and give ample time to these two questions. And I would ask at this point, Madam Chair, if you might help me run around the room with your colleagues and we can listen for a few minutes.
So thank you very much for sharing the thoughts as we prepare this model of service delivery. I can tell you that it's not going to be hard to walk this around to you. I always have commissioners who are willing to share their thoughts. And as you ask these two critical questions, I do have three whose hands are raised right now. I'll call initially on Commissioner Fred.
Thank you, Chair Carter. To the first question, the thought that kept striking me as you talked about empathy, which I agree is critically important in this, is that that's really hard to build into a position description and to measure objectively, and that perhaps the term, although it's more jargony, but trauma-informed might be a more accurate and measurable descriptor that people, if we're just relying on empathy, there might be some folks that can't empathize because of a situation, but the understanding of how underlying trauma impacts behavior and decisions and options might be more useful and measurable and trainable. So that would be, in terms of personal qualities and experience, something that I would also embed into this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Fretham. I will turn to Commissioner Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ryan. This is, it's exciting to see the direction in which we're going, and this is something that I think we've been waiting for a long time. In these two questions, I would really personally like to see a navigator who has experienced or has used county services that knows, it goes to the empathy and trauma informed, but it's also that lived experience. So, for instance, I'm a mother of a disabled child. We have to navigate county services. It would be really helpful for me to have another, parent advocate or someone who knew, these are the things you've got to do with someone with a disability, for instance, or these are the things that you might be eligible for, or these are the ways to connect in. Or if someone has experienced homelessness and now they're meeting someone who's coming in off the street, that they have that sense of lived experience would be really fantastic. It would be a great opportunity. And like we had our navigator last week, right, through the Child Protection Program. I think that was fantastic as we think about that real life experience. So that would be really great. And I think that we will know that we have been successful when people say, I went to the county and it was easy. I went to the county and, I was really nervous going there, or things were not going well for me, but I feel like I have some choices, I have some solutions, I know what I need to do next. And so I think we're gonna hear that and we're gonna know it's working when our community feels like they can come, get the service they need, and they're not frustrated or feeling overwhelmed, or they give up because there's just too much to do. So those are my quick comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Castillo. I'll call on Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. As far as the personal qualities, I guess I also looked obviously to empathy. experience. I mean, everybody goes through trials and tribulations in their lives, I've often said. And the fact is, each of those have an impact on how we relate to other people. And so a breadth of experience and seeing how they have handled that, the tools that they have and the experiences that they've had. And I think that the person has to be a good listener and a good communicator, because people often coming to the county are in crisis, and that's why they're there. And so to have someone that is, and that kind of goes back to being empathetic, they know that they're being heard, and that is a sense of calm. I know that we probably all have had people that have contacted us that have been in dire straits and scared and anxious and angry, all of those things. And oftentimes we can help. Sometimes we just have to help them get to the right place, which is what a navigator does. And I note that in most cases anyhow, even if we can't solve a problem or get through some barrier that they have, that they appreciate knowing that they've been heard and that there's a next step, even if it's not with the county. So I think that's what I would look for in the navigator. When will we know that it's been successful? When we actually know that the one door exists. And that comes down to making it easy, making it more comfortable, because there's still stigma attached to a lot of the services that we provide and people being afraid to contact us. And so I think the navigator can help with that, but it also means that people understand that they're not going to, once they take that leap of faith to contact the county, that they're not going to have to do that over and over and over again until they feel like they just can't do it anymore. So when we truly have that one door, that's where the navigator meets whoever needs help. And so to me, it's, again, making it easy, but making sure that we can welcome people in the way that we intend to through that one door.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I really appreciate these questions and acknowledge that when you're talking about personal qualities, it's tough to identify them in a person in a job interview, perhaps. You know, you want to see them on the job. But I appreciate Commissioner Fretham calling out that a good, another substitute or addition for empathy is trauma-informed. And so I support that. I also support good listener and good communicator, as Commissioner Reinhardt said, someone who's patient. And these are things I'm not sure how you identify these in a job application, but what I would really look for is someone who, while they're communicating, but appreciates the importance of explaining things and why they're happening and how they're going to happen. And I think some people just take it for granted that people know that. And I think it's just someone that's going to be really with that person and where they're at, you know, meeting them where they're at. And I think that goes to their experience in their life experience so that they can appreciate that. What I think is going to be really important in this position is that we actually provide the position itself with support and resources, that whoever is in that position will get from the county the opportunity to have self-care, that they will be able to, be there for people. They have to be there for themselves first. So I just want to make sure that these positions will have support and resources available to them, which I hope we do for all of our employees. And I just want to support that work in our county, that we provide that kind of opportunity for self-care. The feedback, how do we know we're successful? I agree. It's when we hear from our community that they were able to access county services in a seamless, beneficial way. And if they can't, they'll know why. So that they get a call back sooner than later, that they hear from us and are able to speak to the people that can help them. So, and I think obviously this is a feedback model that we'll want to work into this system from the beginning on. And I know that there's different models that one can be used, but to have that in from the start with this effort. So thank you. I'm sure there will be more things that will come to mind, but I thank you for this chance to share this now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McGuire. Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks, Madam Chair. On the qualities, I could come up with probably quite a long list, which isn't necessarily helpful. But I think the most important, and really based on my experience as a county commissioner and my office's experience, is persistence. Because Ryan, I think in your slide set there, one of the most powerful statements you had is shifting the complexity of the county system from resident to county. And just because we have navigators doesn't mean the bureaucracy goes away. It doesn't mean it's any easier for that individual to actually get through our system. And that person is going to need to be persistent as our culture evolves and moves forward. And I give that based on experience. And I'll move on to your next ask there, kind of how do we know successful? You know, from my perspective, as a county commissioner, my office's perspective, that we get less calls for help in navigating our system because it's working when they do their one reach out, right? And when we do get them calls, Joanne no longer has to be the navigator. She has the confidence that she can connect that constituent to the navigator, and that issue will be resolved, will be worked on, will be taken care of. And so, you know, with the experience of that role kind of being what Joanne has taken on for so many of my East Siders, knowing those things, especially the persistence, because even Joanne, after 20 years of working through our system, there are days she pulls her hair out because she just can't get something resolved for a constituent that seems rather simple. So the system's not going to change as rapidly as we want, but the navigators are huge. It's absolute critical for us to start down this path.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McDonough. Do I have Commissioner Fretham? I do have Commissioner Fretham and then Commissioner Ortega.
Okay, great. To Commissioner McDonough's point, I would add, in addition to persistence, problem solver, collaborative. You know, there's a lot of skill sets that exist within the agency, and I think in a lot of our departments, sometimes it's very helpful to have those analytical people who can, you know, follow the pathway and do X, Y, Z in the order every time, but that in a navigator role, you need someone who's willing to potentially chart some uncharted courses, and that folks who need that really rigid structure around their work might not be as successful as someone who's willing to be flexible and solve problems. And then to both Commissioner McDonough and Commissioner McGuire's point about the complexity, shifting that burden to the county into how do we support our employees, I hope that we as a board are able to leverage our roles and contacts at the state and federal level to really push for the tools that our staff are going to need to do this. Because right now, I think a skill that someone would need might be high technology skills, because of the multitude of systems, like technological systems, that each of these programs supports. And that ideally we would find ways to simplify that and the access to that for folks, not only for our staff, but also our residents to be able to access services in different ways. And then I didn't really comment on the second question the first time around, but I think about the things that we've heard about our current systems, and the one that I think Ryan shared earlier was that they felt policed in our building. And I think, what do we want to hear people say? I want to hear them say, that they didn't feel judged, that they felt supported, that they felt like they were helped and that they were valued as a human being and not just a case number to manage and something to check off the list. So I think that sort of feeling of value and that their humanity is honored and their worth is affirmed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Next, I'll turn to Commissioner Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't disagree with anything that's been said by my colleagues, but since we're sort of thinking out loud, two things come to my mind. First of all is how much of it is science and how much of it is art. So we could talk about how we're going to measure and so forth, and I think we got to keep talking about this and seeing how we get there. The other thing is, I've heard words which I totally agree with: good listener, empathy, stigma, collaborative, and then experience and so forth. I got to tell you, we got to be careful again, because if we start talking about strictly experience, it takes us down one path. And what I'm thinking of, a lot of folks have, at least lately, I've heard being critical of the millenniums and their worldview and so forth. But I got to tell you, I think my observations of most millenniums is that they fit all those words: collaborative, listener, empathetic. They don't stigmatize people. But then they'd be lacking the experience. They won't have the experience. How do they surface to the top? I don't have answers. I'm sort of taking it all in and saying, again, what is the mix between science and art, and how do we move on that? That's my thinking anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Commissioner Ortega. I do see Commissioner Castillo again. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Commissioner Ortega. It is, and I think that the experience isn't necessarily something that's measurable, but maybe in the experience, life experience, right? That kind of thing, as opposed to a job experience. And just because it is it is something that's always on our mind, I want to say it out loud. We need to make sure that folks that are in this role don't have any racial or cultural biases, and that they've done their own work, and that they will continue to do the work in that interaction, because we certainly wouldn't want to have that experience at the door. It would also be nice if we had people who maybe had more than one language skill, or we had access to multiple languages, just because of the clientele that we serve. So just wanted to say those things out loud as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you all. I really appreciate all of the thoughts that you've shared. I do still see two hands up, but I think those speakers have already spoken. I just want to then register a couple of thoughts. Commissioner Ortega, should I call on you again? Okay. Just a couple of thoughts. I think that the list that you've heard so far has been quite extensive, and clearly we think about this quite a bit. So I won't go back over all of the things that have been mentioned, and some apply to others that were mentioned earlier, which may be the case as I think through the list, and I've been able to check off things from my list as we've gone around. So again, I won't repeat all of them. This last area of experience and what experience means is very, very important. I think the experience of having had to navigate those systems that we talk about is extremely valuable. So that lived experience of having been there and understanding, that empathy of understanding what it takes, what it can take, and what a real level of assistance could look like that would help move a person beyond a problem of concern is very, very important. that resourcefulness, you know, and the word that I use is resourcefulness, you know, the ability to find solutions. That's probably the problem solving, collaborative problem solving aspect, but even to create solutions. You know, sometimes we talk about the options that we have and we see those 10 options before us, but 10 and a half or, you know, 8 and a half, because it hasn't been explained to us, may not be then available as a part of our package. But people who are resourceful are able to find that, you know, again, to navigate in such a way as to create opportunities that otherwise perhaps would not have existed. You know, to be able to listen, I've heard that, but also to be a quick study, you know, to be able to quickly synthesize a need, you know, where in fact someone may have come for childcare, but might also qualify for respite services, and to be able to find that and offer rather than having someone to know, as we say, exactly what is needed is important. We talked about being culturally informed, and I just want to also land on that one as well, that is important, you know, to be knowledgeable, you know, to not just be aware, but to be knowledgeable and able to effectively address the needs that may be cultural in nature of a particular individual seeking assistance. And finally, I think it's really important that our navigators are resilient people. You know, certainly the people that they work with, you know, have fine points of resilience that are sometimes not discovered, but they come in sometimes, you know, not really reflecting the most cooperative attitude, perhaps, because of frustrations or difficulties that may be going on in their lives, and we're there, you know, to help them. So our resilience then becomes very important. You know, we cannot disconnect because it's not communicated properly, or, you know, because we don't understand why someone is mad, you know, which can be the case. But we have to be there. We have to recover ourselves, and, you know, that's why it's important to be able to have the resources to take care of oneself. We have to be able to help. That resilience factor, I think, is extremely important. So once again, we've walked this around a bit with respect to what we need, what we believe those characteristics and abilities of a good navigator, an effective navigator might be. I don't know whether you're ready for a question on this, but, you know, certainly you ask the question, what should someone be able to share with us, or what do we want to hear? What do we want to see as a result? And I would say that, you know, we most want to hear that we were helpful. We most want to hear that we were able to not only provide answers, but actually to provide solutions to help move to that next best place where someone coming to us knows they want to be at. They may not be able to point to it, but as we are helpful and empathetic and available to care for the human being and for the human need, you know, I think that will be reflected back to us. Not only as we hear that, as people say that, but as we see that. You know, as we see the improvement in people's lives as they interact with us and are able to move to that next best workplace or career or frame of mind, you know, financial circumstance, whatever that may be. We're seeing a community that is improving because individuals and families are improving. And to be able to see that and witness it, you know, we are going to have to understand how we measure, you know, and what we measure. And so that is going to be very, very important. The question that I would ask is, what models are we using? You know, County Manager talked about being able to share back as we learn. And could you just share a little bit about what models, what evidence there may be that we are able to utilize as we move in this direction, and how we are learning from those models in other organizations or in our community? If you're not ready for that question, postpone it, take it later. I think you've heard quite a bit from the commissioners as to what we want to see in an navigator. I'll turn it back over to the county manager.
Thank you, Matt.
No, I'm sorry. I will turn it back over to the county manager to briefly address that question, and then I have a question from Commissioner McDonough. Or maybe I don't.
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. I was going to lower my hand, but since you did catch it and call on me, I really want to reinforce what Trista said, and Tony, you reinforced it. I think this is a big deal. And it's not just for navigators, right? What does it start looking like as we hire? We're hiring people that have already done their own work, as Trista said. They're already coming to us, understanding that they need to learn, grow, and understand their own racial biases, understanding what cultural competence means, instead of us continuing, and we'll always have to do this, but in some ways our approach has been hire people and then we're going to train them in, you must understand cultural competence. You must understand you have race, convince people they have racial biases and to change and adjust. But the transformation of who we start hiring through the door, it goes back to the earlier conversation, who we hire and how we hire them. And I didn't want that to go because I think that's pretty important and pretty powerful. Thanks.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for all of those comments throughout. We were taking notes the whole way here to listen to them. Just a couple of thoughts, and then Commissioner Carter, I'll make sure to address specifically that question that you raised. On the part about hiring, I just want to say it out loud here so it's part of it. I mean, there are specific questions that we have been asking and ways in which we have not been waiting for this navigator conversation to think about the idea of, let's just wait to train people in when they get here. And I think that's important, that's a part of our own process. And I don't think this navigator conversation alone, the danger to the navigator conversation is it's a very important conversation, but is not an overall solution for a 4,000 person organization in isolation on its own. And I'm kind of looking and turning my head because I wanted to make sure there were head nods in agreement on some of that. We need to both do our work with everybody that works here so that these navigators coming in are a value add on top of an organization of which there is already a lot of value there. And I just want to note that. One thing that came up in this conversation was the reference to aides and how they serve as navigators. We did talk about that a little bit last time. I will ask that we send the questions directly to your aides and seek responses from them as well, because they do have a unique insight into this process and experience, and we would value their feedback. And so that'll be a follow-up to today. And then as I transition out of this area, I just wanted to note on the second question that we asked, at risk of answering my own question, I'm going to do it. Just briefly, on the part about what we might see to be successful, a few things as I was listening to you all that I just wanted to connect back to. Oftentimes what we've seen when we're successful is a surprise is often the first thing we notice, is that people are surprised when the system doesn't become a barrier to them getting what they need. And we've seen that in criminal justice reform. We heard some of that in our conversation with transforming systems together. We want to get to a place where surprise is not a part of that experience. But because of years that we carry into whatever interaction we're going to have, I do want to point out that that's always something to listen for. And there are slivers of some very good work going on that I mentioned earlier that I just wanted to leave with you. As we were compiling for today, a couple different events that happened. There were some comments given that show the types of things we hope to see as regular, frequent responses that we receive. In a lobby pop-up event we had in the East Building in 2019, somebody responded and said, I feel it's nice to have a room I can now go into to make copies and get assistance. I like that there are greeters and they're greeting us to help us with what I need. At a financial worker model evaluation where we were thinking about different ways to do our work in 2018, somebody wrote, so extremely convenient for me. It's not far from my house, parking is accessible, and it takes the stress and anxiety out of our submitting of papers and contacting my workers. This was an event where we were getting out into community. And then the third was around early childhood initiative, a lobby survey that we were doing in 2019. Someone wrote in and said, it's good to have somebody here in the lobby. I wouldn't know about services that are otherwise available. I'm glad you are putting somebody here. Now, clearly, this is not all the feedback. I don't mean to make it monolithic, but it does give us a sign that we can do this work And it can be scary to move from where we are today to a system that responds differently, but we can do it. And this organization is poised for it, and we have talented people and a really bright community that's engaged, and an engaged board with a vision and mission and goals. And so I thank you all for all of that feedback as we go. As I turn back to the slide, I want to talk briefly about technology solutions. This came up, and there are impediments in the technology arena, some of which are under our control, and areas where we need to keep doing our work to improve on the system around us. In the short term, the goal is focused on tools to help assist the navigator, uniform scheduling, a virtual document warehouse, virtual tools to bring in service experts. Some of these tools exist in nascent stages or in parts of our organization already. Others don't and need to be ramped up right away. The uniform scheduling tool, for example, is something that doesn't really exist here today, but it does in other places. I spent time with St. Paul College a year ago learning about their one-stop program and the tool they implemented and how it fundamentally changed the way you didn't have to wait in 3 lines anymore because of the way they brought technology into that experience. It was a transformative tool for them that it doesn't work on its own. It works with many other implementation models, but something that was important. You can see over the longer term some of the other areas where we continue to look at building more sophisticated long-term culture-changing tools. The one thing that this slide doesn't represent that's important is there continue to be potential and real barriers around data sharing and the flow of information, sign off to allow things to go back and forth. I intentionally did not want to start with that as an obstacle for you today. I just want to acknowledge there will be moments when we encounter it, and with the same level of perseverance that we're going to hope our navigators have in navigating our system, I'll ask for help from all of you, working with myself and others in this county to have that perseverance to continue to find solutions that allow us to implement these integrated tools. In some of the questions around what needs are there for resident technology right now, there's a survey actually underway right now with departments about what's already been done or planned to do. There's been work in different areas along the way. 2 spots I wanted to highlight for you. Using CARES funding, one of the initiatives in Workforce Solutions is specific to something called Tech Packs. This is both a laptop and a Wi-Fi hotspot with Workforce Solutions specific information, materials, and guidance that allows people to bring the Workforce Solutions lab experience into their home as a way to move the work forward. These are just rolling out now, and we're going to learn a lot in the next 6 months about the opportunity to scale that more broadly. In social services, we've been looking at individuals most in need of technology support and provisioning Chromebooks as a part of that solution. We're working with social services to talk about what they're learning from that process, how it's going. Is it helping overcome barriers that they previously identified in their service delivery forms? And we know that we need a countywide approach to this work, but this is one of those spots where our departments taking aggressive action through that residents first lens benefits all of us by not slowing us down to wait for one answer for everyone. We continue to also look at how residents with devices and/or Wi-Fi all have access to county resource, and how to make sure if you don't have access to the technology or Wi-Fi, we can make that a part of our solution. And in the hour in this case, I just want to mention that we are not the only system. We need to leverage other partners. We're having conversations with all of our cities and our school districts so that we don't duplicate other efforts underway. Schools are a remarkable vehicle for delivering technology into the homes of families of school-aged children. There are sometimes still barriers with that, and so we're trying to work through some of that. And not everyone has a school-aged child at home being provisioned a technological tool. So then there are gaps. Are cities thinking about or filling any of these gaps currently? What is the county's role? We continue to work through those answers as we go. In terms of next steps, this feedback is immediate around the competencies and skills. The questions you got today, they're going out broadly, and it's really a focus on this week and next week, last week, trying to get all this information into an initial 6-month job description with some very core tenets. We'll be sure to share that information with you as it continues to come back. Creating this initial team of supervisors and navigators that will allow us to implement by the end of the summer of 2020 the initial model is an important step along our path. And immediately building in the system of continuous and monthly feedback from users, community, and staff. I think those are going to be key, right? Like, people coming in our doors experiencing our system need to have a voice to share how that experience is going. Community at large needs to have a voice because they ultimately also help build trust or erode trust depending upon our ability to provide in a way that they feel comfortable with. And our staff need to have a voice in that process of what's working well, what do they need from us, where have we fallen short in our first vision, where can we go to continue to improve. The goal is to have a long-term job description in place as we end 2020 to begin hiring permanent navigators in the first quarter of 2021. Finally, as we go to questions and comments in our final 10 minutes, there were a couple of questions at the last workshop I just wanted to briefly address here. Commissioner Fretham had asked about the impact of the Sheriff's Helpline on the 266-8500 line. Generally, what I would say is we've identified somewhere in the range of 20 to 30 call centers across the county, and we are working actively to understand what's a true call center, what's a phone number, and put all that information and measurement into our open data portal. So we have not had the Sheriff's Helpline integrated directly at this point. It's part of this ongoing work right now. We don't think it'll be a significant call volume impact, but it gets at this idea of integrating everything through one door. And in this case, we've had many, many doors in many, many places with many, many phone numbers, and moving that process and changing it is a part of our work. Commissioner McDonough asked about the navigator role. I'm just going to say, hopefully we sort of answered that today, and if not, you could ask more questions. We can talk more about it. The Workforce Solutions presence Commissioner Matis-Castillo had asked about at Arlington Hills Library last time. We will be doing pop-up events at Arlington Hills Library. There are some physical space-related issues related to being there full-time all the time right now. But as we go forward, we're trying to learn, adjust, and continue to do what we can. But this is one of those sites where we want to have a presence. That presence is going to need to be flexible and potentially look different in different spaces. And Commissioner Reinhardt inquired about the technology pieces where we tried to end some of our conversation today. With that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for any questions or comments. I'll migrate back to my seat. Thank you for letting me move quickly through all this information today. And thank you most of all for sharing initial feedback that we were able to take down and help to use to help build this navigator model. Stand for any questions.
And thank you for addressing those questions which we had at our last meeting. I do have a couple of commissioners who are up. I know that we're moving quickly toward noon. I will call on Commissioner McDonough and then Commissioner McGuire. Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks. Well done, Ryan. Thank you to your team. This is really great work here. And my comment is, if you recall, we really started this work back with Julie Kleinschmidt. Ryan, I think some of the first work that landed on your desk as a new hire as the policy director was some of the foundational stuff for this work. And up until today, I feel like we've been getting, trying to find the right thing here, but getting the ship ready to sail, right? We've been making sure that everything's in order on the ship and the sails. We've been packing it with the right provisions and we're putting the right things in place. But with your presentation today, I feel like we've actually set sail on residents first, one door, one county. I really, truly feel like this has become the action plan that we're moving forward in a very deliberate way, and all the work we've been doing up till now has been good stuff, but it's really been foundational in helping us start moving towards transitional work. So thank you for that. I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I really appreciate Commissioner McDonough, your analogy there. I think that's well said, that is what we've been feeling like, and we have all been wanting this work to happen, faster and more completely. And I feel the same way, that this is, we're getting ready we're going to sail this ship. We've sent out some early little boats to check it all out, but I think now we're getting ready to have the ship sail. So thank you and everyone who's had a part in this, because I know it's been county-wide effort. I just have a question, and none of you will be surprised by this. As being on the library board, and three of our centers, or three of our centers will be in our libraries. Just to let you know that the library board, and we had a meeting last week, that they are, supportive of our efforts, but are very going to be very deliberate about making sure that the integrity of the libraries and the services that we provide in our libraries, which are excellent and which people really
appreciate that that's not lost while we combine now activities in those buildings. So I don't know how permanent this work will be as the navigators in those buildings, and it may be more permanent as we go, as we think about it, or as it's proven out. But just to know that we have a really great library board that's going to be watching that, and I know all of us will be just paying attention to making sure that these many roles that we're asking our library buildings that are buildings to be that we don't lose the great work that's already being done in those buildings. So, and right now we're not having people return to our libraries, so this work won't necessarily be conflicting in some ways, but just to pay attention to that the dual purposes that we're asking for the buildings. So thank you. And if you have a comment on that, County Manager, that would be great.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, my only comment would be a sense of loss is something that we'll both have to manage through and guard against. As we move into a new frontier, there are always scary things that come with that. I want to acknowledge those fears and then suggest that the vision that this board has been charting is a more compelling one than where we've been, even if that's a little bit challenging to get there. And so I thank you for your comments, and we'll do our best to manage through the change.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question and for your response. I will check in with Commissioner McDonough. I do see your hands go. No, thank you. All right, I know that we have just a few moments left, and I just want to thank you again for this movement forward on residents first. I can check in later. I had asked the question earlier, and I do see that in the PowerPoint later, we do talk about the need for this to be informed by users, by staff, and by community. I just asked a question about what kind of models we see that may be working. Where are we checking in, and from where are we drawing information to build our model? Could you just address that quickly as we close out?
Yeah, thank you for calling me on that, Madam Chair. I said I'd answer your question, then didn't answer your question. So I would ask that we do some level of follow-up. I'm not ready right now to provide you a long list, but I'll give you like one example. When we were talking about this the other day, a number of you have commented, a number of staff have commented through a visit that you did to the Large Urban Counties Caucus out in San Diego and some of their own ways in which they have tried to transform systems in that county around a health and well-being model. And I've never received more text messages from everybody in like a 3-day period about things that we could learn from. That would be one of the examples that I think we should look at and draw upon where we can. And that would be the type of example we're looking for. I'm sure there are others. I don't have them at the ready in front of me right now.
Well, thank you very much for circling back around to that question. I think what we've heard today gives us confidence that we are moving to that county of excellence. Residents first, one county, one door. It's the door you come to, and to be able to provide the services that are so greatly needed in a comprehensive way. This has been our board meeting today. It is a board meeting during which the major topic has been this workshop. We do appreciate everyone's participation, and we are now at a point where we have completed our business. I see no hands objecting, and we then are going to be closing out our meeting. We are now adjourned. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jim. Oh, the voice is gone. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you so much. That made my day.